And where normally I don't like to give these topics credibility by reporting on them, I almost feel that this one qualifies as an active, persistent thread in that I feel that it is both pandemic induced and the start of a trend.
Yeah.
And what this is an innovation zone promoted by a state legislator in Nevada that would kind of create a company town, right? So the idea is that if a company owned enough property, and one of the biggest examples of this is Tesla, because Tesla has a huge gig factory in Nevada where they're producing batteries, and they will also start producing Tesla automobiles. The idea is that a company would, and this kind of goes back vast to the Sidewalk Labs debates, right? Of the idea that a company could collect taxes, administer social programs, set policies, and be able to essentially have autonomy where the state still has veto, the state still has, overriding power, but it allows a company to act as a county. And as a county, set their own policies, collect their own taxes. And Nevada is already has a lot of local autonomy in terms of allowing counties to set a lot of policies in general. So this is meant to attract investments, and it's coming at a time when Silicon Valley is seeing an exodus. When
Mm.
people are starting to leave San Francisco or starting to leave California, and Nevada's pulling a little bit of an Arnold Horshack of, pick me, Mr. Carter, pick me. But I kind of wonder if this is going to be a trend, and this is why I'm curious to hear your thoughts, Vass, as to whether this is going to be a trend in terms of jurisdictions doing everything they can to try to incentivize companies to come to them. In this case, giving them a near carte blanche when it comes to policy as another incentive to try to encourage them to settle, especially at scale. Because the key part of this, and again, this is a proposal, hasn't been passed, hasn't even been introduced in the legislature, but it's predicated on the idea that you'd have to invest a lot, that you'd have to invest a lot of acreage to justify it happening. And as Mike has noted in the chat, it's all coming from blockchain people. And it's all kind of targeting blockchain people, which adds its own layer of sketchiness. But again, from a regulatory perspective, I'm curious to hear your thoughts here.
I mean, yeah, that's a funny thing about innovation zones and like their history, right? That they were bounded places where, again, back to other like commercial zoning or industrial zoning, we were kind of a little bit hands off once we had designated like what's permissible there and what's not. I think it is pretty fascinating in terms of kind of defining an incubation space. I do think companies do need space to kind of pursue the interventions that they're thinking about. I worry that in this let's say post pandemic context, but so many governments are going to be focused on this economic recovery. So what is the role of technology and innovation, both from a procurement, but also appealing to innovation and achieving that? So if this opportunity space is a way, or innovation zone is a way to pilot or experiment or try to put a container around, what is probably nothing more than throwing spaghetti at a wall, and not on the city's dime, that reduces the risk of the public investment. But you're right, in terms of the carte blanche, I think that freaks people out. I don't think we have the security or trust in private companies that they will act in a way that later, down the line benefits the public interest, as you pointed to maybe with the Amazon cameras a little bit, or as we might talk to when we think about ghost kitchens, which I'm super interested in.
Well, and what I also, to your point, found interesting, so this critique of the initiative came from this libertarian Jeff Mason. And
Okay.
his argument was that this is just a county by other name, and that if you really wanted to do an innovation zone, it would be something different. But I kind of feel, Vast, that the point you're making is that libertarians often miss the role of social policy in addition to economic policy. And I've written about this previously in terms of incubators. That incubators are not just startups sharing a space; it's mentorship. It's
Mhm.
assistance with patent law. It's assistance with entrepreneurship and economic concepts and cultural stuff like diversity and inclusion. It really needs to be a 360 approach. and too often think of these innovation zones as just libertarian or economic approaches, when for them to be successful, you'd also want to have paid daycare, right? You'd also want to have good schools. You'd also want to have affordable housing or good immigration so that you could have the best and brightest from all over the world come in. You know,
No,
Sharita, sorry, go ahead.
oh no, I mean, look, you re-articulate things I allegedly touched on and make them sound so much better. So I'm so grateful for that. But you're right. I think in terms of the future war on talent, I mean, we've sort of said, you know, work is going to be, you know, geography doesn't matter anymore. We keep having this, like, every few years we're like, is the earth flat? No, it's spiky. But I think what's fascinating is, you know, what private companies are going to compete on. It's not going to be free M&Ms and ping pong tables. It's going to be the you know, mind-blowing experience of, we have co-located a nonprofit childcare at the first two floors of this building. Boom. Like, it's like, you know, that's such a geography problem. And if that can happen, if that can be piloted in an innovation zone like that, where it's like, let's just also be real. What if we could be intentional about how we're designing the space and how we're supporting people and how we're recognizing, you know, that people have lives and that work is part of those lives and that people have families. That's something I think the pandemic has been fairly good about. We're very kind of sensitive about how people are doing. It's my understanding, because I don't have any children at home, is that it's really to also be teaching your kids and having everyone on devices. But will we lose that when we go back to work or back to, you know, the before time or real life or whatever real life really is? So maybe that gives me some optimism with innovation zones, if they're going to recognize, as you've said, those social dimensions. If they can even fathom that, then they could really show larger cities how it's done. And frankly, public policy, let's be honest, we love the copy and paste. We love a jurisdictional scan. We love something that's working. Copy it, Control C, bring it into our report, Control V, pitch it, you know, find some champions, make it seem like it's our own. But people are very reluctant to be the first movers, which is why it's so effing cool that the city of Toronto, at least in a Canadian perspective, has pushed forward in the pandemic on this municipal broadband network, because that's a good example. Oh, tie back.
Well, and that's where, you know, Sharita's point about this could be different if it was approached from a cooperative perspective. And to your point, Vas, about the copy and paste tendency of policy circles, you know, maybe that's where there's opportunity to pilot these types of ideas so that they can be spread and they can be shared. You know, Sharita points out that there's huge cooperative traditions in places like Basque Country as well as Catalonia, both of which are sort of contentiously part of Spain, but have developed that kind of social, economic, and policy infrastructure. But I also think, not to get ahead of ourselves, that the smart commons idea is another area in which I think this type of policy innovation or policy piloting can go a long way towards reimagining what innovation and reimagining what innovation zones can be done. But, you know, to jump back to something Mike pointed out, any blockchain project that is not trying to subvert state regulation is probably a scam, because as he kind of points out, that is the raison d'etre of the blockchain world. So it does get a little contradictory, even though in Nevada there are elected libertarians, to still have libertarians sort of talking about, you know, my brain starts to short circuit. So that we'll flag that as a active, persistent topic for the future.